Yeah, I'm there as well. All right, let's move on to Isaac Okoro. 3-year deal to go back to Cleveland, was stuck in restricted free agency limbo for a long amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Wes, this is I want to get to Okoro because I think he's an interesting player, and I have a take about him that I want to throw at you, and that's kind of gets into a meta basketball take. But I want to ask you to say this first. The Cavs still feel like a team that needs a trade to me. And I don't even mean it in terms of their big four anymore, but I look at their role guys, particularly LeVert, Niang, maybe Okoro in 6 months, or whatever, when he can be traded. I think like their role players still need a reshuffling. Like I still look at this, particularly the Niang one, because I just don't think he's all that good. Like nice guy, has a value. I think they overpaid him last summer. LeVert last year of his deal. I don't know if he's a guy you're going to want to re-sign again next summer. I still look at this team and just think the role players need to go make a trade, whether it's using some seconds, like finding someone who just needs a new situation that's maybe undervalued right now because they don't have a ton of assets, obviously, and the guys that they would need to move off of are going to, I think, be viewed as negative assets. But I think they still need a trade to find something else for this roster to make it work in the way I think they're hoping.
I don't know that they need a role player trade necessarily, because I don't know what role player walks in and makes the star players fit better all of a sudden, right? Like you've tried different versions of it with Isaac Okoro, the defensive leaning wing, Max Strus, the 3-point shooting guy on the perimeter. We've gotten more of the ball dominant guy and like a Karis LeVert. Like we've gotten so many, George Niang, we've gotten a Dean Wade. We've gotten so many different versions of role players. None of them have just made Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell make sense. None of them has helped Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen make sense in the front court. So I agree with you. I think this team needs a trade. I don't know that or any other kind of role player makes it all make sense. I like the Isaac Okoro deal. Go ahead.
Can I throw a trade? One that I kind of referenced this on the show before that I think it's been discussed, but and he did say on Brian Windhorst's live show in Akron on Friday that he did buy a house in Atlanta, so I don't even know if he's like really available. But if they did something that was centered around like LeVert for Larry Nance, would you think that makes the Cavs better?
LeVert for Nance? Yeah, I mean, I think Nance helps for sure. It gives them another look that they can get to. I think a player like that, if they could find sort of their Naz Reid, where you get another big who can pair with Jarrett Allen or Evan Mobley, that's sort of the secret sauce in Minnesota, right? Is that they can always play with two bigs, and it always sort of at least works. With
the Cavs Cleveland, are like weirdly the Cavs are weirdly small. Like they're weirdly small despite playing with two bigs. If you really look at them,
no, they are. So yeah, a player like that helps. I think that's a good trade.
All right, so Okoro. Here's my Okoro thoughts. Love Okoro. Have loved him since he came into the league. I have a soft spot for guys like him, West, who are tough as hell, really competitive, strong, rugged wings. He's also improved his shooting year over year, where like percentage wise, he's become like a shooter that, if you just look at the percentages, that is a guy who is a quality enough 3-point shooter. 39% on 3.1 attempts last year in 27 minutes is pretty solid for a wing rotation player. But I think he's, because of how his career started, particularly his rookie year when he played a ton of minutes, the most minutes he's played per game in his career, it was under 30%. It feels like he's ended up in this weird space where he is, on the scouting report, not treated as a shooter, despite the fact that he is a competent shooter and can like attack a closeout and cut pretty well from the corners and the thing. Limited offensive player. You're not going to want him with the ball in his hand in any way, but he can attack a closeout, attack on the swing. Like he can do stuff. I think he's someone who should fit, I think, get boosted a little bit by Atkinson's system versus, say, a JB Bickerstaff's. But I think is like compared to like a Max Strus as the other side of it, Max Strus was like a 35% 3-point shooter last year. He gets treated like he's much more dangerous in that percentage because of his reputation and the volume. Okoro's like the opposite, and I think that's like, it's such a weird thing because I think like the numbers tell you useful player, defensively really solid, probably their best perimeter defender outside of throwing Evan Mobley in to defend a Jimmy Butler or Durant or something for stretches. But the scouting report seems to treat him like he's not, and that's such a weird place for a key role guy to be.
Yeah, you do run into like reputation hiccups in the NBA quite a bit, right? But you could change them, and shooting basically 40% overall last year, 39%, 40% from the corners. That was a pretty good mark.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between taking the wide open threes and then the contested ones. And I think if you start contesting Isaac Okoro, he's not shooting 39% anymore. Right? Like, it's just such a big difference. It's sort of the Rajon Rondo thing. Well, he was left open, and there was a point in Rajon Rondo's career. He was like, I don't know why people don't respect my 3-point shot. It's like, because you shoot it with 15 feet of space every single time, dude. I can make that shot. That's not the point. So, he's a standstill shooter. He's not really shooting on the move. All this stuff. No. By the way, was never supposed to be coming out of Auburn. That was never on the scouting. That was never in the scouting report on him. So, that's all well and good. But you're right. Like, PJ Tucker made a career out of being an elite defender and shooting threes on spot ups from the corner, right? Even though nobody ever defended him in the corner either, he still was an elite corner 3-point shooter. You just need a spot. And the offense is never going to revolve around Isaac Okoro. He just needs to be a good enough 3-point shooter that he could stay on the court. Because in today's NBA, that's all you need. And by the way, and he is. So that's okay. Everything else he gives you in terms of a defensive player, a defensive playmaker, the cutting, all of the other things that you're already talking about, those are all NBA level skills, and he's making enough threes. I love the deal. I'm a little surprised that no other team. I think Isaac Okoro is a good player. He's still only 23. Yeah. He's only 23 years old. I'm a little surprised that nobody gave him more than 3 years, $38 million. I know he's a restricted free agent, but nobody even came in with an offer at $45 million at 3 years, something like that. I think that's a fine offer for Isaac Okoro, who's one of the better wing defenders in the league, very versatile on that end. Hits the threes at a respectable clip when he's open. I don't know. I'm a little surprised, but that, again, it sort of reflects the thing that everybody's been talking about all summer is the money's just not out there the way a lot of these mid-level guys thought it was going to be out there. And I think Isaac Okoro got caught in the same trap as a Caleb Martin, where you just thought this money was going to be out there, and it wasn't. It was a little bit different, obviously, because Okoro was a restricted free agent, and there was very little left up to him. But I don't know. If I was another team, I'd be kicking myself. I think Isaac Okoro is a good player. I think he's going to get better. And there's going to be a couple of years where there's a team in need of a wing defender that, like, why not the Pacers didn't even think about kicking the tires on this? Like, there's just teams out there that could have used a player like this.
Detroit, I know, had some interest. It was thought like that was going to be a team to go after him. That didn't materialize, obviously.
And that's a team that doesn't make any sense for Isaac Okoro. So the one team that was like, hey, we need more... we need more long defenders who are okay shooters at best. Like, Detroit's got plenty of those already.
Yeah,
but true. There's, I don't know, Charlotte, Indiana, like a bunch of teams come to mind that could have used a guy like this.
Yeah, and I think too, Wes, like when I've seeing him more than I think most, just because like this was a team that I was.
You're the Okoro expert.
Yeah. I just like the way he even just carries himself to me is a guy I want on my team. Like, he is tough. He doesn't get rattled. There's little times where you can see him give up the ball where like that is where he gets rattled. But in terms of like getting, how sometimes when you see a guy get scored on when he's defending just like an elite scorer, and you can see it kind of break them over the course of a game. That's not how Okoro operates. Like, he's a guy that if you say, hey, in the playoffs, you're going to defend Jalen Brunson. This happened when he keeps coming off injured when they played the Knicks. That was a guy who, when like the Cavs got like the reputation of being punked in that series against the Knicks, he was not a guy that I felt like was having that issue in that series. Like, he actually, I thought, acquitted himself as a 16-game player, like pretty reasonably in the context of a team that didn't acquit itself at all. I think this is a guy you can play in your playoff rotation. Like, I do truly believe that, particularly for a team that just needs a perimeter defensive body, for teams that like you think you can make enough offense elsewhere, particularly if you get a step up from Evan Mobley this year. Like, I just think this is a guy that can play in your 8-9 playoff main rotation and is about the right stuff as far as how he approaches the game with his toughness and all of that. Like, I think this is just like a positive basketball player with some warts, obviously, but like that's why he costs what he costs.
Right.
I would rather, like, if I'm Cleveland, like, to me, I think he's more impactful to them this year than a Levert or a Niang. Like, I think he's above those guys in terms of making like a real positive impact on a team.
And outside of Mobley is sort of the one young guy that is still on this roster that there's significant room for growth yet still, I think, for Isaac Okoro. Like, he's never going to be Jaylen Brown. He's not going to be like that kind of player. But I think there's a very real world where he outperforms this contract. I mean, it's $12.6 million annual average value. With his defense, and if the 3-point shooting keeps going where it's going, There's some ball handling stuff with him that I think there's been positive movement on. This is just a good player, right? And I think on a value contract.
Garland at 24. Do you think you say Mobley's the one young guy? Do you view Garland as kind of tapped out of that?
I think I know what Garland is. I think there's obviously always marginal room for growth, but what is he, 6'1", 6 foot on a good day? Like, he's just a little bit smaller. He's an awesome point guard, awesome floor general. I think in a different context, he could be more impactful, right? Like we've talked enough about the backcourt pairing with him and Donovan Mitchell. It's been well documented in several places, but and last year obviously wasn't his best year, but I mean the guy's been an all-star before. Like I think we pretty much know who Darius Garland is, and that's a good player. Like Darius Garland is an all-star caliber point guard. I think we know that.
Yeah, when he's at his best and in his I think not having like last year again, I will say this until he proves me wrong that it was something more going on there. That last year was just a season from hell for him. And that was contributes to like that just happens. Cavs are going to be weird. Atkinson's got a lot to I think sort through with some of this rotation. It's really tough job I think to kind of figure out what the right balances are in this roster. When even bringing a quarterback needed to be done. In some ways, it would have just been easier to be like, all right, like well, that's one less thing we can just play straightforward and not overthink this. I think there's the first half of the season, probably first 20 games at least, going to be a lot of Kenny Atkinson, I think, juggling stuff around here, Wes.
Yeah, this team isn't like in need of a consolidation trade. That's not really what it's about. Like the decisions Kenny Atkinson's going to have is fits, 5-man lineups. How do I maximize Garland and Donovan Mitchell? How do I maximize Jared Allen separate of Evan Mobley, vice versa? All those things. Those are really the things, but like I know I'm assuming we're putting Max Strus into the starting 5. Karis LeVert's a good player. Isaac Okoro is the best player, a good player. Dean Wade is a good player. George Niang is solid. Like there's depth here. There's a lot of talent here. They needed Okoro. He's really the only wing defender that they have. And so there wasn't an option where you say, like, let's get rid of this guy because it just makes the lineup decisions easier. No, I think having Okoro makes some of those lineup decisions easier, not having Okoro. So, it's not a depth concern. This is not a too many guys problem. It's that some of the guys don't fit problem. And that's what Kenny Atkinson has to figure out.
Yeah, it's quite